is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Stephen Cole. Our top stories this hour. The presidents of the US and Ukraine are holding talks amid growing tensions with Russia. Travel chaos continues into the new year. Thousands of flights are cancelled due to a lack of staff and the bad weather. A record outbreak of avian flu across Europe. British authorities cull at least 500,000 birds to try and stem the spread of the disease. And the ancient technique of fishing in winter with horsepower chisels and a very large net. But first, US President Joe Biden is scheduled to speak by phone with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Sunday. The conversation comes days after Biden warned Russian President Vladimir Putin there would be a heavy price to pay if Russia invaded Ukraine. Julia Chapman is in Moscow. Julia, what can we expect from today's call?
President Volodymyr Zelensky says he and Joe Biden will be coordinating steps for peace in Ukraine and security in Europe. And of course, Joe Biden will undoubtedly be briefing President Zelensky on the outcome of his phone call with President Putin just before the new year, during which the Russian president outlined Moscow's security demands, the guarantees that it wants to see NATO and the US make in a ironclad guarantee written down agreement. And that is what we are going to see negotiated in the coming weeks, according to the Moscow side. But of course, those are some very ambitious requests from Moscow for NATO to stop expanding eastwards, to promise never to include Ukraine, and to promise not to position offensive weapons in Eastern Europe. And of course, Joe Biden, during that call, expressed his concern that Russia is preparing a military invasion of Ukraine. U.S. intelligence says there is a substantial buildup of troops on Russia's border with Ukraine and has reiterated his support for Ukraine's territorial integrity. So certainly they will be discussing the threat that they see from Russia and what can be done to stop that as these negotiations get underway in the coming weeks.
Now, Julia, there is a series of high-level talks coming up in an effort to, I suppose, try and ease those border tensions. What role will Ukraine be playing in those?
It's not clear how much of a role Ukraine will play. Certainly, the first round of talks will just be between Russia and the United States. The next round will be between Russia and NATO. And of course, Ukraine isn't a NATO member, but is often involved in consultations with the military bloc. But certainly, Ukraine believes that it should have a seat at the table. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said that Ukraine should be involved in any kind of security consultations because ultimately it is Ukraine that will be most affected by the outcome. And in a tweet on New Year's Eve, Volodymyr Zelensky said that nothing should happen about Ukraine without Ukraine. But there is no channel for direct dialogue between Moscow and Kiev at the moment, and Russia has been circumventing Ukraine to hold these negotiations directly with the US and NATO and not with Ukraine, its neighbour.
Julia Chapman in Moscow. Thanks, Julia. There are just 4 months to go until the French presidential elections. Almost all the major candidates are in full campaign mode, but there is one notable exception. The president, Emmanuel Macron, who is widely expected to run for re-election, but so far he hasn't declared his candidacy. Our correspondent in Paris, Ross Cullen, takes a look at the race so far.
Striding towards a second term in office, Emmanuel Macron says he is focused on the job, but he seems to be in a campaigning mood, the clear favourite in early election polls. For politics professor Frédéric Matonti, he remains the one to beat.
I think that very honestly, even if there are some difficulties, for example, if he's in the second round against an opponent from the right, that'll be difficult. And because there are so many people who detest President Macron, right now I would say he does still have the greatest chance of winning.
However, there are challenges coming at the incumbent president from all sides. Ultranationalist TV pundit Eric Zemmour's entry into the race energised both the hard right and his opponents. Zemmour has been on the offensive, branding the young President Macron a teenager who led France into a void. And France could have its first female leader. The far-right Marine Le Pen made it into the runoff last time in 2017. She will hope to go one step further this time. There is also the mayor of Paris. The pro-environment Anne Hidalgo is the 2022 candidate for the Socialists, but she's not well known outside the capital, something she's trying to address, seen here at a rally in the southern city of Perpignan.
I dream of a Republican left, of a popular left that changes lives, an ecological left that rises to the level of its historical mission.
Écologique! Valérie! Valérie!
And for the first time, the centre-right Republicans chose a woman as their candidate. Valérie Pécresse has had a surge in polls, and some see her as the top challenger to President Macron. And for the public, there are lots of potential presidents in the race.
I think Eric Zemmour has emphasised important points like national identity and immigration, but I hope his voters rally behind the moderate right and Valérie Pécresse.
There is a health crisis which is worrying, so in addition to uncertainty around the candidates and their ideas, it's harder and harder to project where we will be in 5 years' time.
I think at the moment there are no particularly striking personalities in France, and I will probably vote for the least worst.
The election will take place 2 years on from the first hard coronavirus lockdown in France, but the effects of the pandemic are still being felt, and Emmanuel Macron's management of the crisis will be scrutinised. Immigration, security, climate change. There are many other subjects that will be argued over on the campaign trail in 2022, but who will win the keys to the Élysée Palace, the French presidential office and residence, well, that is still very much up for debate. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
In South Africa, firefighters have managed to contain a major fire that broke out at the Parliament building in Cape Town. The fire began in the early hours of Sunday in the third-floor offices of the building and spread to the National Assembly chamber. Firefighters battled the blaze for several hours and say no one was hurt in the fire, which at one point threatened the building's roof. An investigation has started into the cause of the blaze. Volunteers and rescue teams are looking for 3 missing people after a wind-stoked wildfire hit 2 towns in Colorado. The blaze destroyed almost 1,000 homes, but no fatalities have been reported, although the 3 missing are feared dead. President Biden has declared the scene a national disaster and freed up federal funds to assist those worst affected. An earthquake with a 5.5 magnitude has hit the city of Lijiang in southwest China's Yunnan province. At least 22 people have been injured, with 2 in a serious condition. Social media footage captured the moment when the quake struck. A search and rescue operation is currently assessing the damage. The UK is being hit by a record outbreak of avian flu, with the country's chief vet warning poultry farmers to keep their birds indoors or risk losing their animals and paying a fine. Our correspondent Kitty Logan tells us more.
Avian flu is sweeping across the UK with devastating consequences. One of many recent outbreaks confirmed in this Wiltshire village.
So the scale of this outbreak is the largest we've seen in the UK. It is impacting both commercial farms and also what we might call backyard non-commercial keepers that might just have a few hens or ducks or geese in the garden.
The infection here appeared in a small flock of domestic chickens. They were culled, their housing destroyed, and nearby footpaths closed to contain the virus.
The infected chickens were discovered in the fields behind me here. The government has since put a 3-kilometre protection zone in place, and anyone who keeps poultry within this area needs to take special precautions.
And that means keeping chickens fenced in.
And we've got the other chicken pen we got 30 or 40 chickens in there, and we've put netting over top that.
Within the protection zone, there are also restrictions on moving poultry and visitor access.
The spread is likely to be largely by transfer of organic matter into poultry housing. So that's why it's so important that we take all those biosecurity measures to make sure that we're not taking any organic matter into our backyard birds or even into our commercial flocks.
All birds on this Derbyshire poultry farm were lost too when avian flu struck. And as new outbreaks continue, bird owners everywhere are urged to take precautions.
So this is like hygiene, separating wild birds from their own domestic birds, having foot dips, regular hand washing, changing clothing and footwear and things like that.
Avian flu can spread with migrating birds as winter starts, and those wild birds die from it too. Dead swans were reportedly found along this river close to the confirmed outbreak in Wiltshire.
The reason it's so serious is because of the severity of the clinical signs really with this, and it's not unusual for people that the first they know of having this particular strain of avian influenza is that they find dead birds.
On the west coast of Scotland, thousands of geese have succumbed to bird flu this winter too. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds says it urgently needs help to stop the outbreak in the area. But avian flu is spreading all across Europe. UK authorities say there's little risk to humans here and that poultry products are still safe for consumers. But until this latest wave of the virus passes, even these free-range chickens will stay cooped up. Kitty Logan, CGTN, Wiltshire.
Still to come here on CGTN. Gearing up for the Winter Olympics, we'll be taking a ride in the special winter vehicles made for the extreme weather of northern China. Hello, I'm Stephen Cole. What's on your agenda this week? I know when it comes to news, you're sport for choice. So many channels, so many opinions. But it's time to step off the news roundabout. Time to cut out the noise. Get to the heart of the real story with a talk show with a difference. I'll be finding out what the world is thinking by talking to the global decision makers and helping you set your own news agenda. Remember, we don't just report the news, we set the agenda.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time has come, and this idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very busy when we're trying to save the world.
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Beijing.
The world's fastest skaters coming in with speed and balance.
Figure skaters showcasing their elegance and precision are expected to shine.
A sport of focus and concentration currently is arguably the game's most prestigious event.
The 2022 Winter Games are here. Join us for all the action, only on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our top story. The presidents of the US and Ukraine hold talks amid growing border tensions with Russia. January is usually a bumper month for people booking holidays, but travel restrictions caused by COVID are still reducing passenger demand. Thousands of flights have been cancelled in the past week due to staff shortages and bad weather. The airline analyst Andrew Charlton told Jamie Owen it's going to be another difficult year for the aviation industry.
2021 was a year where every now and then we would have some hope that perhaps things would get better. We had some hope that perhaps things would get back to something like normal, and then every single time that hope has been dashed. 2021, we get to the end of 2021 with about 75% of the aeroplane operations that we had in 2019, at the end of 2019, which of course is our baseline. But a very different set of operations, very much locked into and limited to domestic and regional flying. There's really not a lot of international flying, and that international long-haul flying, and that produces another series of really interesting problems, of course, which I think we're going to have to unravel in 2022.
What do you see? Are we talking about airline consolidation? Will big names go bust? I wonder if we're going to see the airline industry and flying become more expensive. Will this be the year when perhaps those of us who are environmentally minded turn our backs on flying? What do you see as the big stories in 2022?
The single biggest story next year, I think, will continue to be sustainability and trying to find ways where we can fly with fewer emissions. And that's really difficult because at the moment, the only way we can do that is to use sustainable aviation fuel, which is made from biosources and so forth. So already there's an argument and tension between food stock and fuel stock. And as airlines are required to fly more and more environmentally consciously, sustainably, inevitably more expensive fuel will have to be used. Inevitably, airfares are going to go up just on the sustainability point alone. The second point in this, I think, is that in 2019 and unfortunately somewhat in 2020, we saw governments giving money to airlines in a desperate bid to preserve the status quo, just to keep what used to be the case remaining the case. It's impossible to see that governments will continue to put their hands into their pockets. We're going to see airlines perhaps hit the wall, and in any other normal commercial business we would see consolidation. But unfortunately in aviation we don't see that because of our regulatory structure, which is almost 80 years old, which is to say ridiculously outdated. Because of that, there are some very strong national issues and national ownership and other such requirements in the way. And if governments have been giving money to their national airlines, they're not very keen on seeing other countries' airlines take them over.
Do you sense that we're approaching a time where responsible adults turn their back on flying because it's environmentally the wrong thing to do?
The millennials, I think, are taking a very different attitude to this. We saw towards the end of 19 and all the way through 20 flight shaming, things like that. Add that to the expensive fares that I think are inevitable. I think what we're going to perhaps see is people travelling less, doing perhaps more, so perhaps those weekends away, stag parties, long weekend breaks, things like that are going to be much more difficult to justify, both as to cost but also amongst your friends for what you're doing. And so I think people will continue to want to travel. Travelling is a wonderful thing. Building connections, restoring connections with your friends and your families, for sure, is something that will continue. But I think, as you rightly say, people will do that much more responsibly.
South Korea's military says a person has crossed the heavily fortified border and defected north to Pyongyang. Very rare for South Koreans to defect to the north. Defection is more common the other way around, of course. South Korea's military said it doesn't know the fate of the defector, but has sent notice to the north asking for their protection. Israel managed to avoid cases of Omicron until late December, but with an increasing number of cases, the country's top health official says it's likely the population will reach herd immunity. Around 60% of Israel's population is fully vaccinated, but hundreds of thousands of those eligible for a third jab haven't so far taken it up. A research station in Antarctica is battling a coronavirus outbreak. At least 16 of a 25-strong scientific team has tested positive. The first case at the Princess Elizabeth Polar Station was identified in mid-December in a person arriving at the facility from South Africa. The 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics are just weeks away. As the athletes get ready, the organizers have enlisted specially designed vehicles to help handle extreme weather conditions should they occur. Dai-Kai Ye explains.
Any driver knows how to make a U-turn, but today we're going to show you how to make a 180-degree turn in the same spot. Here we go. See?
It's called a utility terrain vehicle, or UTV. It handles like a car, but is also large and powerful. It's able to operate not only on bumpy roads, but in jungles, deserts, and snowfields.
This vehicle climbs up effortlessly, even on a steep slope. I've been told by an expert here that it's rare to find this level of turning power in such a small vehicle. Hi there. What's special about this vehicle?
This UTV, as you just saw, is good at climbing mountainous areas, and it's amphibious. It's equipped with a bunch of core technologies such as center turning and a combination of tires and continuous tracks.
Zhang says his Chongqing-based company, which specializes in producing certain types of equipment, is providing a modified version of the UTV for the Winter Olympics in Beijing. The vehicles will be available during events in case of any emergencies. The business manager of the company told me which parts have been tweaked.
It has a bucket for snow removal on the trails, which is really easy to put on. And we also install tracks. In order to do that, we move the tires 20 centimeters outwards. It makes it easier for the vehicle to drive on icy and snowy roads.
Zhu says the UTVs have special interior heaters in place to cope with bone-chilling weather. I've been told that nearly 36 vehicles will be available during the Winter Games in February.
We provided 9 utility terrain vehicles and 22 all-terrain vehicles to the Olympics, and there are 3 backup vehicles. They are there to help for events like alpine skiing, biathlon, figure skating, and cross-country skiing.
The Chinese manufacturer has confidence in its creatively designed UTV, and it may lead to more domestic brands down the road. Dai-Kai Ye, CGTN, Chongqing.
Jiagan Lake in Jilin province has long been known as the destination of choice for ice fishing in northeast China. The ancient method of fishing, which has been handed down for centuries, is still going strong today. CGTN's Yu Li reports.
In freezing weather, Jiagan Lake is thriving with tradition. Fisherfolk catch hundreds of tons of fish with the help of techniques going back 1,000 years. Cultural and folklore expert Cao Baoming says fishing on the ice requires special tools.
下往东浦的第一道工具就是冰川，这个铁尖儿、铁裤，这叫铁裤，是由木匠和铁匠精心打造的。那么当冰川把它穿透了，1米左右的冰的冰洞之后，那些冰的碎冰，我们就开始用冰崩子往外捞。
When the hole is ready, the net is deployed. A winter fishing net consists of 96 individual nets, nearly 2,000 meters in length and 10 meters high. Residents call it the net wing. The large net slowly spreads underwater, forming a pair of giant wings and moving forward drawn by the net pole.
扭毛那个叫走钩，所以这个师傅他是使用一种非常重要的一种这个手法，这手法一般人不会弄。他通过这扭毛一扭呢，底下的带网的杆子就正常的运行，要使不好这个劲儿，要使不好这个劲儿，那就这个扭钩就不能顺畅的往前运行。
Fish are collected along the way when the net moves to the extraction hole, about a kilometer away. A solid net full of fish cannot be pulled up by human strength. This is when the animals come in.
这个就叫马轮这个马轮呢，就是所有的这个网，重网全靠它的马拉它以后的动力产生，把网绞上来。
Then comes the joyful harvest. Winter fishing in Chagan Lake runs from December to February. With wit inherited from the ancestors and a reverence for nature, residents find resourceful ways to cherish life in a harsh environment. Mr. Cao calls it the living heritage of northern culture. 于丽 CGTN 松原 Jilin Province.
Our top story again. The presidents of the US and Ukraine hold talks amid growing border tensions with Russia. And that is the world today. Thanks for watching. We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK 24 hours a day on Freeview. More news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's Fraser. For now, from all of the team in London and from me, Stephen Cole, it's goodbye.